What's up, guys? Back for another video. Had to catch up with a lot of stuff, but we're getting back into working on the cars. So we got a Memorial Car Meet coming up, so first thing we have to do is trim the inside of the bumper here to fit for the new intercooler on the Chaser. We will be driving this there. Have customer car here. We're installing a linked Fury in, some new injectors. These are low impedance, so the ECU can't drive it. Not sure if you guys want to see overall just bringing customer cars in for videos, but this had an old like ECU master in it. Switched it over. This has built-in wideband now. And then we also just have to fix all like the S13 stuff. So we finally got our fuel pump in, and then we just have to fix all of our aero, repair our headlight mount, and mount that back up. So here's some of the damage a little closer. We need to repair our fender here and here. We pulled out our bash bar with the truck, but we can just kind of push this back into place. Bumper over here has damage here, here. This is all blown out here. And then we got crack here on the rear bumper and here. So we're not going to do any sort of like outside repair. We're mainly just going to re-glass it on the inside and just drive it like this, because this is meant to be the thrash car. We don't want to keep putting too much money into it for paint and body work. And then we do have a livery we're still putting on, so we're just gonna put that on over and just kind of send it. Alright, slight mishap here. The fog light was actually hitting the intercooler pipe over here. So I might just need to modify that internally, but otherwise, front bumper is now fitting with the intercooler, and we just have to bolt it up on the sides, and we'll be done there. Alright, so we got it all mounted up. So here is where the intercooler pipe was too close for the fog light, down in here. But overall, just a quick trim, good enough to do this, because this car does still need to get repainted at some point too. So now we have this taking up less room in the garage with the bumper, getting out of our footway. Now we could jump over to the S13, do the fuel pump, and then get to taking off all that aero to mask up and resin. What the heck is this? Oh, so trunk spring popped out, I guess. But yeah, we'll get this set back up so we can not have this fall on our heads and set up the tripod. Alright, so obviously unplug your fuel pump setup first. Come in and unbolt your top cap. These are all 10 mil if you 10 millimeter if you still have the factory bolt. And then the top comes up, and then you have to undo your hoses down here. Your clamp size may vary for the bolt, And then there's 8mm bolts holding the top hat to the gas tank. Might get a little bit of fluid leak here, but it's normal, so just make sure to know which side is each for the fuel lines. There's the fuel. You take your trusty 8mm, stick it on the ratchet, and you want to be careful with these bolts if they haven't been out before in a long time, because if they do snap, like there's 2 snaps in this tank, you're going to have a bad time trying to seal it. So just hold your ratchet at the base, that way you're not putting too much torque on it. Otherwise you might need some sort of PV blaster or something. We'll pop this out and then head on to the next part. And you just have to be careful of your fuel level sensor too. That's going to be that little arm there. And you just want to let this drain back into the tank before you make a mess inside your car. Alright, so now we have the pump on our bench. You want to note your overall length down and pull off your old pump. We do have a different connector here than the new pump, and we have a DW300 pump. This flows 340 LPH just like this one. So we shouldn't have to mess with fuel pressure regulator if we didn't mess with it at the track, but we will have to reset base timing, or not base timing, but the base fuel pressure. And then we're gonna have to switch on our plug. So I'm gonna actually leave on this plug though, just in case we ever get something different that uses this. And then I'll put the new plug on this side. That way we pretty much have an adapter in the system already. So I'll just simply take it off this. Go some more fuel. And as I said, we're gonna cut these down here. And this pump is essentially junk at this point. So you want to put your sock on the pump first before you go to put it back on here. There's also this little tiny snap ring in here, if you can see that. You don't want to lose that. That is what's going to hold this sack onto the pump. So I'm just going to take that off separately and get this set up so I don't lose this. So this just pushes on like this. You'll hear a snap when the sock is seated in the pump properly. And then you have this little nub on top, and that's where that little ring goes. So you can just barely put it on and use the socket to kind of push it all the way on. Alright, so that's what it looks like with the snap ring on. I just used the existing socket I had on to take off the hose here, and that was a good size for this. So if we double check our height with where our hose length is, it will end up about the same spot. So you take off your little protective cap and stick it back in the hose. And then just make sure to orientate everything so that it will be in a good spot for when you put it back in the tank. But since this is a relatively small setup, you don't have to do any crazy clocking with the sock. So just get it hand tight to where you feel too much tension, because you don't want to over tighten this. And then we just have to put on our plug. And that's it for that. Drops back in the setup. Super easy. Alright, so new connectors on, heat shrinked, crimped. Proper way to do it is with these open barrel crimps here. This puts enough pressure on the wire to cold weld it, and then it's a good heat shrink. You're not relying on these goofy butt connectors like this, but since the wire is already so short, I didn't want to change it up here initially, but we also are changing our hanger setup soon. So this is just a temporary fix. Then you just want to zip tie your pump to the frame of the top hat. Don't forget to plug it in, and we'll drop it back in. Alright, so here's the new setup. Fully zip tied in, and you just drop it back in the same way. Make sure your outlets are going towards the front of the car. Just kind of fish this in there, like so. I've accidentally bent the fuel rod, so I'm just gonna check that again and then I'll pop it back in. Alright, so our hanger's back in. I accidentally pushed this line too far up, so I had to jack up the car to put this back, but I noticed it was pretty ripped here, so I did replace the hose while I was in it. It's a pain finagling it back into this spot, but we got it. So it's pretty much just bolting back down this cover, plugging it back in, and testing that the system works. So I'll do that. We'll prime the system and make sure it's good to go until we move on to the aero portion, which we'll probably do for another day, but it will be in the same video here. It's just getting too hot to do all this at once. Now we'll just go, we'll key this on and get over to our pressure regulator and see what kind of pressure we're making before this primes. That does sound like we got a little bit of a leak back here. And yeah, it's making a little mess somewhere on either side. So we'll pop this top back off and take a look at where it's leaking. Probably the line on the chassis side. All right, so all we did was tighten back up the line. We do have a lot of pressure now, so we are gonna have to turn that down, but I'll have to plug in the laptop to keep the pump constant. But if we recycle the key, we'll see what it is. Maxing out our gauge on prime. So this pump's definitely a lot stronger than the other one. Makes me not worry about the PDM setup anymore because that was a new setup for when we put in, and then we magically started having the pressure loss, but probably just a fluke and just the pump. It was a year old, but hit or miss. But yeah, so that'll leave it out for the pump stuff, and then we'll just come back for the aero. All right, next day, cutting off this little zip tie, pop off this bumper here. There was another mounting point that got broken off on the inside, so right now we just have the zip ties. And yeah, pretty simple. And then it pretty much just pulls right off. Pop it off that side, pop it around here, and there we go for this. So now we can jack down the car a little easier now that the bumper's out of the way. And then we can just set this up so we can show you how to fix the bumper without having to repaint, and we can overlay the layers back together. Alright, so we got all of our bumpers off and the one fender that's damaged. So we'll just re-go over. So you can see how this one is sort of, the layer is sitting back on top of this. You're not seeing as much of the other bit. Same with here. But on here, the layers are not overlapped. So essentially we're just gonna try to pull part of the bumper back over this to cover up as much as that is possible. Same with the rest of these. And then we're gonna lay tape over the outside to set a barrier, and then we're gonna glass everything from the inside. So there's the front bumper again, and the fender damage as well. So this is where we mounted our bumper on the one spot, so we have to repair that. And then our headlight mounting here is missing quite a bit, so that's gonna have to get pulled back down. So this is gonna be the hardest of the repairs, and the rest should be relatively easy. Alright, so we got everything taped up now. You can get a better idea from here. Basically, you want to set it up so you can access everything pretty easily. I'll jump between the sides. Most of the repairs is on this side, and then the rear bumper has it on this and this. So we left a little more room on this open end of the table to get to it easier. But yeah, there's your block offs. Good view of the paint there. And then you just glass everything from the backside. So we'll mix up some resin and some hardener and get our glass kind of laid out in some pieces, and we'll probably do a few layers, 2 or 3 layers on each spot, and then it should be repaired from there. And it'll look okay, but I mean, it's not gonna be perfect, but it is a temporary repair and just something to get by. All right, so we got our resin here. We mixed this up, repaired our spots here. We needed to leave this tape here to tension our mount back in place, so this may be our only trouble area, as we said before, but I got most of the spots done. Looks like I missed this little crack here, but otherwise 1 layer is done. We ran out of resin that we mixed initially, so we'll have to mix more and do the rest on a 2nd layer. So now we'll know how much we need, and we just basically do that, and then it's all set. Here's the big mat that we have, and just use a paintbrush, kind of tap in all your resin, make sure everything's saturated well, and then your edges, like here, will get trimmed when it's all hardened. So yeah, that's pretty much the base setup. I'm not going to show the whole process of doing that, as this isn't like a professional body job, but yeah, basic rundown of fixing the car, and next time we'll have it all back together and get started on doing our live read. So yeah, catch you guys in the next one. Peace.